All right. This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, Mayor for the District of North Vancouver, and the pleasure falls to me to welcome everybody here to the regular meeting of Council for Monday, July 24th at 7 o'clock. I'd like to start the meeting in a good way, and I'll be respectfully acknowledging the original peoples of these lands and waters, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam people on whose unceded ancestral lands the District of North Vancouver is located. We value the opportunity to learn, share, and serve our community on these unceded lands. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented? Hearing none, will somebody please move adoption of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Back, second by Councillor Forbes. Call the question on the motion. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. We have no minutes circulated for adoption this evening, and so I'm going to go straight into the public input period. Council reserves a period of up to 30 minutes of time at the front end of every regular meeting of council to hear issues of concern from members of the community. We have already started a speakers list for people who called in advance to the clerk's department, and you'll see that up on one of the slides here. So people who are speaking to agenda items are given preference in the order, but you see that here. The first three speakers are for public input on agenda items, fourth speaker on non-agenda. And then after that time, if we still have time left in the half an hour, don't worry, we'll still, if other people want to add their comments after that point, we'll go around and check in and see if people would like to add their comments at that time. So if people keep to their time limit and make their comments brief, it doesn't mean we cut the period short. It means that other people will have more of an opportunity to speak if they so choose. At this point, so I'm going to start on the speakers list that we have right there. So I'm going to invite Kelly Bond to come up and make your comments. And I should say that this meeting is being held in a hybrid fashion, which means all members of the public, the council, the staff can participate either in person or virtually. It is noted that both Councillors Ma and Councillor Murray have given their regrets. They are traveling at this time, and so you have the 5 remaining members of council here for this evening's meeting. Kelly Bond, welcome to the meeting. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, members of council. It's so great to see so many worthy housing initiatives before you tonight. But tonight I've chosen, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening in favor of agenda item 8.7. Councillor Pope's motion on the agenda tonight prompted me first to quickly review your council reports policy adopted in December 2022. Said policy confirms that indeed Councillor Pope is well within her authority to bring this before you for consideration today. In other words, the policy provides no guidance as to what topics, including land use, that a councillor can or can't bring forward, and I thank her for advancing this one. To be clear, the motion tonight is not meant to debate any merits or demerits of the project itself. However, in considering whether it would be a worthy applicant for expedited consideration of a development permit and variance, one cannot overlook the multiple social benefits that this project stands to provide for our community. Without a doubt, the Legion replacement, assisted living beds, healthcare worker housing project, and daycare at the center of the motion tonight exemplify the guiding principles of Council's 2013 Public Assembly Land Strategy, which states, public assembly land supports the social needs of our community. Council supports the retention of publicly used lands and buildings where appropriate for long-term community purposes to the greatest extent possible. Existing public assembly lands should be retained within or near OCP growth centers. This project does not seek a rezoning away from public assembly. And finally, it states that more intensive use of existing public assembly lands is encouraged, and creative, flexible models that use that may involve several user groups within facilities is supported. Of course, the Legion renewal and its means to generate self-sustaining income alone is worthy of its own in its own right. And being the daughter of an RCMP veteran and granddaughter of a war veteran who served this country, I could tell 100 stories on what the Legion means to my family personally. But time is short and it's getting shorter. As for the additional land uses proposed, assisted living facilities are vital for our aging world. Mr. Smith's housing needs summary report tonight identified aging population and its increasingly complex healthcare needs as an issue of significant concern as we consider our housing need. 5 years from now, 20% of our municipality will be over the age of 65. We are growing old and have critical need of more specialized healthcare beds. This cannot be understated. The healthcare worker housing is also critically needed and offered at 15% of median rents would be a benefit to the community. I've obviously didn't time myself well, so I'm going to conclude with words in the Lynn Valley local plan from the long range vision that they shared through to 2025, which really circle back to what should be the desire of any neighborhood to promote unity, pride, concern, and care for each other's needs. This project does so. And so, Council, it stated in that long-term plan, livable residential neighborhoods which have a rich variety of housing options, innovatively designed to accommodate all people and incorporating flexible design and universal access so that residents can stay in their neighborhood regardless of their changing needs.
I need to get you to draw to a
Council,
close.
I urge you to pursue whatever action you can to bump this project up in the development planning queue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Kelly Bond. Next speaker I have is Trudy Hubbard, joining us here in person. Welcome, and when you're comfortable, you have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Trudy Hubbard, and I would like to explain why I'm in favor of this project. Expediting affordable seniors care and worker housing is top of my agenda just in the community. My experience in the North Vancouver seniors community as past president, North Vancouver Kiwanis Housing for over 25 years, or 22 years, sorry, executive director, North Shore Volunteers for Seniors, and seniors advocate director, and current board member of Keep Well, which is a seniors group across the North Shore. It allows me to support this proposed project. I am a resident on the North Shore and have been for 60 years. So being involved in the seniors over the past 20 years. There's a strong need for more seniors care and worker affordable living spaces in the district of North Vancouver, as we all know. So our seniors can be cared for in a safe environment close to where they live their lives, which I feel strongly about, that they can stay on the North Shore, and close to family and familiar facilities. They don't want to move away. My experience in the community demonstrates every day that such a facility as the Legion with affordable housing space with site workers space is needed as soon as possible. It takes a while to get these buildings off the ground, but we need it like now. Living on the North Shore is no longer affordable and commuting is next to impossible. So having living spaces for staff is a wonderful concept. The location is near to amenities such as the local mall, banks, and doctors. Being close to family and friends is a real plus for resident outings, for them to be near where they've lived all their lives. I encourage you to please expedite positively to this proposed Legion development and allow as many affordable spaces as possible on this site for seniors and their care workers. As many spaces as you can possibly see is really needed. Thank you for allowing me to speak on this subject. I feel strong about it. I went through the North Vancouver Kiwanis Housing, and the district was wonderful to work with. They worked right along with us. Coming in the building, I thought, oh, this is different than when I was here the last time. There was so many people because not everybody was in favor of that at that time, but we got it through, and now all those seniors are living there, and it filled up the second month. So the need is still there. So thank you for allowing me to speak on this subject.
I mean, I probably should just say, just to be clear, there isn't actually an application before the district. We expect one. It's looming. It's sometime going to be coming soon. So if people in the neighborhood are wondering why there aren't signs up at the site saying development proposal or public hearings coming or other, it's because we actually don't have the application yet. But it's a bit of a cart and horse issue, because if you want to talk about expediting something, you want to do it before the project, or do you want to do it midway through the project? And so we have to have this discussion, but people might be surprised to find out that there's actually an application, that there currently isn't an application, but one is expected soon. So the details are not necessarily in the normal, currently in the normal way available. They're not on our district website. You can't search for the project currently as a current application on our site, but when an application comes in, it will follow the proper process through at that point. So I just wanted to say that so people don't get a little surprised. There's the redevelopment for the Legion. There's not currently an application, but one is expected soon.
The community is very aware.
They're very aware of the last proposal. I don't know that the community
no,
has
I
seen
don't
the
know.
current
Yeah.
proposal. Yeah.
I'm just saying in the community.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
The next speaker I have is Don Peters. I believe Don is joining us virtually today. Can we just check with the staffs if we've seen Mr. Peters? Mr. Peters is on the phone. Don Peters, can you hear me? It still says muted next to the phone. You'll have to press *6 to unmute yourself on the phone in service. So once again, I'll say, Mr. Peters, you have to press *6 to unmute yourself on the phone service. Right now, you're coming up as muted. What I'm inclined to do is go to the next speaker, and maybe we can. Oh, there we go.
Oh, there we go.
Hi, Don. Don Peters, can you hear me?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm technically challenged, as you probably know. And good evening to you, Mayor Little and councillors. I'm speaking tonight, like the other two people tonight so far, Councillor Pope's motion regarding the current Legion site on Lynn Valley Road. My name is Don Peters. I live in the district, have for many, many years, and currently chair the long-standing Community Housing Action Committee. Mr. Wolstenholme approached our group back in the early pandemic years with his vision of what this site could become. Since then, our committee has met with him a number of times to review it and discuss the details, and I can tell you that we feel this proposal can bring much to the district and to the North Shore. It is innovative and desperately needed. In many ways, this is actually a relatively new proposal. I must say we think its various elements are forward-looking and will address some important critical community needs that have plagued us for years and are getting worse. As we know, the pandemic revealed serious deficiencies and weaknesses in the long-term care system, and with the closing of the Capilano Care Facility, we are in desperate need of a modern, full-service, long-term care program like this one at the Legion site could be. In addition to a new modern Legion, it will provide, most importantly, 96 long-term care units at a time when we face a serious shortage of care beds and assisted living for seniors. With the closure of the Capilano Care Facility, the long-term care situation on the North Shore is indeed dire and worsening by the day. Our district alone needs 276 of these care units. What will that number be a year from now or two? Councillors, in my work with the Housing Committee at North Shore Community Resources, and I mean this literally, hardly a day goes by without a family member calling to inquire about care facilities for an aging family member. Too often, I'm afraid, we are at a loss to advise them. As well, this project will provide non-market affordable housing for healthcare employees, a children's daycare program, and a community kitchen available to the local residents and Lynn Valley groups. As we know, Your Worship, the housing crisis is, well, simply, it's a growing disaster on a number of fronts. A terrible shortage of affordable rentals, of childcare spaces, increasing evictions, poverty, and food insecurity. But this facility will significantly address several of these: decent, affordable health care for seniors, as well as affordable on-site homes for their care workers and a child care program. And it will demonstrate the district's commitment to families and seniors' health. We commend the council, seriously commend you for bringing this forward tonight for consideration, and we urge your approval to expedite it as soon as you are able. Thank you, Your Worship, and good night, sir.
Thank you, Don Peters, for your comments. Sorry, just Councillor back your thing is getting queued. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so the next speaker I have is Steph Wilson joining us here in person. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Okay, I'm here to talk about the anti-2S LGBTQ overpass rallies that are continuing in North Vancouver. Last week, I spoke with a parent living near the overpass who was perceived by the rally group to support trans rights. A well-known anti-LGBTQ activist and rally participant spat on them and followed them onto their property. While on the overpass, I've been called, and I apologize for the words that I'm going to be using, a faggot, a tranny, and a pedophile. I've had a rally participant follow me and tell passerbyers that I, quote, like to sleep with little boys, unquote. I've had an individual in a vehicle lean out the window and scream, trannies get the wall, which is internet parlance that suggests trans people should be executed by firing squad. This is not a protest. This is hate and discrimination. And these are the kinds of people who have been emboldened to speak up as a result of this government's silence. Because the rally group believes they belong in North Vancouver, they are threatening to bring rallies onto other overpasses on different days. The rally group wasn't on Mountain Highway overpass on Thursday. They were back on the Fern Street overpass, where they hung a banner of the organization Sex Change Regret. That organization is part of the so-called detransitioner movement, which claims that gender diversity is a mental illness and that gender affirming care is a secret government ploy to trick children into turning trans. I can appreciate that discussions around sexual orientation and gender identity can be hard. A lot of us, myself included, didn't have SOGI in schools. I grew up in a place where you just didn't talk about these things. But you don't need to be queer or trans to understand that disinformation and dehumanization are a threat to queer and trans existence. Hate stops people from living authentically and with joy, from participating in communities and sharing their voices. We don't have to go back very many years to hear from queer and trans elders who spent their entire lives hiding as an act of self-preservation. Hate also incites violence. On May 11th, overpass organizer Robert Webb told RCMP, quote, "We don't have guns, you know, but it's going that way," end quote. How are residents of North Vancouver supposed to interpret such statements, if not as a threat of violence? In a week, the District of North Vancouver is scheduled to raise a pride flag. Pride is a celebration, but it's also a reminder that queer and trans rights come out of an incredible fight against bigotries and discriminations. This year in particular, Pride is also a protest against rising right-wing extremism. This isn't an abstract threat or an American problem. This threat is coming from North Vancouver residents using overpasses to disseminate and normalize an incredible amount of conspiratorial far-right hate. Silence is a statement in itself. History repeatedly reminds us that silence is how harmful ideologies foment unobstructed. These overpass rallies cannot be ignored. This government must say something, literally anything at this point, to publicly address the harm that is being caused. You don't have to have the answers and you don't have to have a solution, but you do need to acknowledge that there's a problem and that people are being hurt. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much for your comments, Steph Wilson. Okay, the next speaker is, the only other signed up speakers actually have opted to speak to their items. So what that means is when their items come up, I see specifically 8.7 has speakers for and against it. We'll call on those speakers at that time. So going back out, I believe we had a virtual hand raised from Hazen Colbert wishing to add his comments to the public input. So just check in. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me? You're marked as muted on the device. Hazen Colbert. Oh, there we go. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me?
Yeah, Mike, I could actually hear you, and my device was actually marked unmuted, but I had to wait to the clerk would unmute me. The first thing I'd like to do, you all guys all know where I live. It's 1111 East 27th, and I want to reach out to Stephanie, who just spoke. Stephanie, please ignore Robert Webb. He has reached out to me. I won't have anything to do with him, absolutely nothing, and I ask you not to have anything to do with him either. The next thing I want to say is that I absolutely support Catherine Pope's resolution tonight, and I would only ask that we see things through a different lens. Instead of thinking about care spaces and care homes as beds, let's think about them as doors, because a lot of the people that need care don't need to have care 24/7. They need to have care for part of the day, but they're actually capable of actual independent living. They can leave and come back. So let's talk about those as doors, please. I also want to say that this proposal by Catherine opens up a question, which is, why has the district's bylaw for PA assembly not been updated since 1965? This is important because in 1965, the average life expectancy in Canada was 71.87 years. And there was actually no legislation in the country that allowed for long-term care homes. Extendicare, Ontario created the legislation in 1966, and Extendicare built the first facility in Ontario in 1968. So clearly there needs to be the D&D bylaws need to be reviewed. And I agree with Councillor Hanson, who indicated that he wants to see the bylaws also reviewed, because when he voted against the Coach House 2 or 3 weeks ago and voted against affordable housing, he was concerned that the bylaws don't support affordable housing. In closing, I'm going to close now, and I'm going to yield my time, if I could please, and I think I'm allowed to do this. I asked the chair, I'll yield the remainder of my time, and please call back Kelly Bond, because she has some additional things she'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, would anybody else like to address the public input period? Yes, so I'm going to take the first row here, and we should have enough for 2, possibly 3 more speakers. So if you can just keep your comments brief, that'd be appreciated.
I'm Robert Webb. I'd like to respond to some of the disparaging remarks made to me today, about me today. I am the guy down on the overpass, as you may remember. And I'll reiterate from last time I spoke, I was there for 10 months without issue, trying to raise awareness for some of the stuff that's going on in our world and in our city, including the fraud of the pandemic, the 15-minute city initiative. We call it a healthy city initiative here. I've spoken and talked to urban strategies down at North Van City. They're involved in helping initiate that initiative, and they're being paid by our taxpayers here. To get back to more recently, about 2 months ago, somebody provided me with an anti-SOGI sign, SOGI 123. I believe our friend Stephanie spoke of it. It is a difficult subject. I didn't really know that much about it, but it certainly triggered authorities and most everyone here. It's a difficult subject. I've since educated myself profusely on the subject. I've gone to schools, I've gone to libraries, I've looked at what's involved in the curriculum. I invite you all to have a look at it yourself, decide from there. But again, what got me down there was the harms happening from these injections, the experimental ones, the ones that we were told were safe and effective. They're not. They're suppressing all kinds of adverse events and deaths. And it's designed, the bioweapon is the injection. 3 to 5 years was its purported activation time, and we're coming up fastly on 3 years. And, you know, as my quiet little protest running for 10 months has been overtaken by these pride people, which, by the way, there's a couple of gay people on the bridge, and we have no issues whatsoever with anyone. When you're an adult, make your decisions. It's your life, it's your body. Look into this Soji stuff and leave the children alone. There is a concerted effort to encourage children to alter their bodies, to that it's not okay to be in the body that you're in. If you are at least bit inclined, we'll tell you how to do it, and we won't tell your parents. It's wrong. Leave the kids alone. That's my message down there. Hear me. Thank you for listening.
Good. Right, and the next speaker I have, sure. And it looks like we should have enough for both of you to speak, enough time, so.
Hi.
That'd be great.
My name's Brandon Wong. This is my father, John Wong.
Welcome.
We were going to speak in regards to the agenda item 8.7 in regards to the Legion. We live on Hoskins Road right behind the Legion, and for many years, we haven't been completely satisfied with the demeanor in which they portrayed themselves to us. There's been a lack of community involvement in regards to these what's the word for it?
The application.
Proposals, sorry.
Yeah.
It's a bare bones approach for me, but even the first time around when they were developing a proposal for affordable housing, there was not a lot of community input with the people around the neighborhood, and frankly, I don't see any benefit that it has. I've been there for my whole life. I'm 22 years old now, and I don't see anything that's going to help the community in that regards, just building a care home. I'm going into nursing myself, and I'm interested in geriatric medicine, geriatric oncology, long-term life care, and I do believe we do need more senior assisted living and living for seniors who can provide by themselves. But I don't think the Lynn Valley Legion is the appropriate place. Especially, I understand that Lynn Valley Road is a main arterial road in the district, but it's frankly, it's quite frustrating that it feels like we're going to be pushed away from my home. And I don't want that. I don't want that for my father. I don't want that for my brother. I don't want that for any person who's deciding to live in that area. I understand it's expensive, but it's not fair to the rest of us. And I also don't find it fair that Councillor Black and Councillor Pope did have involvement with the Legion prior to this next application last year during their campaigns for the council. That is, if I understand this correctly, a conflict of interest. I don't know. If this is a breach of ethics, then I don't know what it is. I don't understand why they're still on the council in this regard. They should be removed from any decision making. And yeah, I beg the Legion to at least get the community involved, walk around to the people in the neighborhood, talk to them, knock on their doors, and let them speak their mind. It's not fair that I only learned about this issue last night. And frankly, it's, as a young man, I find this quite troubling, quite sickening that, you know, even a child would be able to go around and talk to the neighborhood and get input from everyone. It should be that. And yeah.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Wong. I will just add that the courts have consistently ruled that a donation in and of itself does not conflict a member of council. It has to be a much deeper relationship than that.
Thank you for the clarification.
But the donations are a matter of public record for the purpose of knowing.
Is that information for the public as well?
Our website still maintains the financial disclosures going back, I don't know, 3 elections.
Okay.
something like that. And so, yeah, it's publicly available information and should be publicly disclosed, but it's not in and of itself enough to call
Okay.
out conflict of interest legally speaking.
Okay.
But thank you very much for your comments.
May I say
tonight.
one thing before closing?
You can say up to 3 minutes. You're
Okay.
absolutely welcome to. Yeah.
I've been a resident, my wife and I, since 1993. We have endured the troubles and the conflicts of the Legion back of our property. I don't think they've been very transparent. They haven't been very community oriented to the people around them. They don't seem to respect the citizens that are around the Legion. I think council will have to take a hard look and see whether this project is beneficial for the citizens of North Van or the Legion. I believe there's some underlying issues here. There has been no communication, even on the first go around, where we found out the information and we circulated and went through the neighborhood, and obviously the results stated that nobody was in favor of the development. I'm not against development. I just think it's the wrong area for development, especially with the civil work that has to be done, the traffic, and I think whether lawn care facility is what we do need. Obviously, I'm not against it. I'm a senior. I'm 61 years old, so I believe in that we need housing for the older generation, as you know, myself even at some point in our lives. But I don't believe it's the right place to have it. And I think the Legion has been very secretive about what they're doing and not communicating. And I just think that council should have a long look whether it's going to be benefit to them or is a benefit to the community. So that's all I have to say.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Okay, and I believe we've completed the public input period here, and so I'm going to resume the regular process. Tonight, we do have the next item up is a delegation, and so we are going to have a presentation here for plant-based cities movement. So at this point, I'm going to invite the delegation to come up to the table. Welcome. And just to describe the slight difference with the delegation versus public input, with the delegation, nonprofit organizations within the community are provided a little bit of a longer opportunity to come and make a presentation. They're permitted to speak for up to 5 minutes. And there's an opportunity for question and answer at the tail end between the council and the applicants. So when they're done their presentation, there can still be a little bit of follow-up as well. But we only permit one delegation per evening for a regular meeting because they can go on a little bit in time sometimes. And so I will encourage the members of the council specifically, if you have a question, get to the question at the time. But at this point, I'm going to welcome the delegation. Thank you so much. It'd be great if you could introduce your organization and your supporters that you have here today.
Good evening, Mayor Little and council members. My name is Carrie Eilers, and I'm a 30-year resident of the District of North Vancouver. Ben and I are here today with the Plant-Based Cities Movement to request your commitment and action in relation to one of the most effective ways to deal with the climate change. Presenting with me is Ben Haggerty, also a resident, and we have Eleanor O'Sullivan here, and Dr. David Steele is available remotely to answer any questions that might come up. So the District of North Vancouver Council has been actioning effective projects and incentives since 2017, but we're missing one low-cost action. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is comprised of about 1,000 scientists worldwide and has received a Nobel Prize for their work, in their 2022 report said, a reduction of excess meat consumption is amongst the most effective ways to mitigate GHG emissions. And the reason is that agriculture's global warming footprint is huge. In fact, agriculture itself contributes more than all of transportation combined. And within that, 80% of GHG emissions are attributed to livestock production. Canada, sorry, I'm having a moment. Okay. Canada has made a commitment to the Paris Agreement that we will reduce our yearly CO2 equivalent megatons from a total of 2020's value of 638 to a 2030 value of 427. Unfortunately, with our current policies and actions across Canada, the current estimate is that we will not even get within 1/10 of that reduction goal. And we are warming at twice the global average, which we can see from the last few years on the news and in our own backyards. This is an Oxford University graph that shows the greenhouse gas emissions per 100 grams of protein for various foods. One of the reasons that producing animal proteins results in disproportionately high emissions is methane. Methane is 100 times more damaging than CO2, but it has a really short lifespan. So we can reduce our need for animal agriculture, and then we can reduce our methane. I'm a total supporter of buying local for the economy and for the environment. But if we want to look at things from an emissions perspective, food choices has a greater impact. A person replacing red meat with a plant-based meal once a week for a year reduces their emissions more than a family buying only local food for their meals for a year. Greenhouse gas emissions from food are not included in climate action policies, not federal, not provincial, and with only a sprinkling in general, not municipal either. And we all have to do our bit, because the climate crisis, it doesn't know any boundaries. It doesn't know a municipal boundary versus a provincial versus a country. So we're looking for leadership from all levels in government, including this one, and we all need to do our part. So now over to Ben.
Thank you, Carrie. After having just reviewed that data, I would like to propose our envisioned options for council to take. Our vision is that district continues to demonstrate innovative climate leadership by factoring food emissions into its climate action plans with targeted timelines reflecting urgent need for climate action. Higher education is proving this to be feasible. 14 universities across the country have joined the 2020 initiative to reduce their carbon outputs through plant-based menu options. Chief among them are BC's own UVic and UBC, who had offerings for meat and fish decreased by 20% and 13% respectively, and every participating university has seen such success. Canadian municipalities are showing success too, like Halton Region and Brampton in Ontario, Montreal, and Vancouver, all passed plant-based motions in these past 2 years, and Saanich is on track to pass their own motion within the year. We now ask you to lead by prioritizing plant-based options at any district-funded event. Make it an easy choice by normalizing plant-based options and promote their environmental benefits. You'll find this to be a low logistic, low-cost act, but please have a measurable target. In fact, doing so will help district commit to 2 of your pledges: sustainability and promoting small business. Research has shown that green, i.e. plant-based businesses and their missions lend to sustainability in health and climate. Therefore, something easy like catering from these businesses will help you commit to your goals. My colleagues and I are happy to help you, and we encourage you to consult these other resources, including Greener by Default, which was instrumental in bringing plant-based options to New York City's public institutions, like hospitals, at no extra cost. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And I have a comment from Councillor Pope, and sorry, a question from Councillor Pope.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm fully supportive of what you're doing. In fact, a year and a half ago, I stopped eating red meat because of the environmental implications, but also something else you didn't mention, which is my own health. And the evidence is very strong that when it comes to cardiovascular health and many other things, it's important to not eat red meat. So I'm on a path to get there, but I really appreciate organizations like yours promoting more plant-based eating, and I'm trying to promote more plant-based eating around council, although I've got a tough road to haul with the mayor who loves his hamburgers. So, sorry, couldn't help it. But at any rate, thank you very
There are
much.
very good plant-based burgers, your worship. I'd be happy to suggest quite a few that actually taste quite good.
I prefer to go the ethnic route and go for falafel burgers.
Next, I'm going to go to Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. I found those statistics very powerful. Was there, did I get this right, that the reduction of a plant-based meal, was it per day or per week, is the equivalent of 1,800 kilometers of driving per year?
Correct. Well, per year.
1,800 kilometers of driving per year is the equivalent of the reduction of how many meals?
Let me go back to my notes. Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah, yes, I thought that was.
We don't mind going back.
Actually, is David Steele available?
Yeah,
Because he's,
That's 1 day a week with no red meat is equivalent to that number.
So if the seven of us here cut out one, hypothetically, one red meat meal in a council meeting, that's getting close to over 10,000 kilometers of driving a year. It made an impression on me seeing a statistic like that. Thank you. And you have my word that along with Councillor Pope here, we're going to be following up with some of these ideas. Thank you very much.
We'd be grateful for that. Thank you.
and if I could just add, when it comes to the emissions for any kind of animal protein, we're also talking about the emissions that for all the grasslands and forests that have to be cut down in order to feed these animals. They all need to be fed, right? So it's not just that one animal, it's the whole production around it. That's for the greenhouse gas emissions. That's when it starts to get really high. If you just look at one animal, it may not be as high. When you look at the production, it's very, very high.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I see no further speakers at this point. So I'd like to have somebody move receipt of the delegation. Councillor Pope, I think you were the first out of the gate. Would you move receipt of the delegation? Sure. Okay, and second by Councillor Hanson. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your presentation here today. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Mayor and council members.
We're getting into the habit of applause here. We're getting into the habit of applause here tonight. I did just want to say it's actually the policy of the District of North Vancouver that we try to keep away from cheering and applause and other things, because you never know when you might be intimidating someone else from being able to bring their views forward. And so we always encourage people to abstain. Of course, exceptions are made for kids. When we celebrate kids, we can cheer all we want. But at this point, we've completed the public input period. There are still two speakers who'd like to speak to item 8.7, and we'll call on them at the time that that item comes up for discussion. But we're moving on to the regular meeting reports. Section 8, I haven't proposed a consent agenda. I think most of these items are up for their very first time of having discussions. So other than the first item, which is simply up for approval, I think not really much else fit in my definition of consent. So I haven't proposed one. So at this point, we're going to go to item 8.1. This is the proposed update to the STEP code requirements. This one happens to have been debated by the council already. And so this is up for adoption, which means there's no debate on the item. And so Councillor Hanson, I have your hand. Is that from before or is that for this item? Okay, so I'm happy to move the staff recommendation, seconded by Councillor Back. I'll call the question on the matter. All those in favor? Contrary minded? The motion carries. On to item 8.2, the Housing Needs Report update. This is something that was introduced recently, and I'm going to go over to Ms. Atfa for your comments on the matter.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, Mayor Little, members of council.
You need to get your microphone on. There we go. Yeah, we got it.
Thank you so much, Mayor Little. Good evening, members of council, community members. This item, 8.2, is an update to our housing needs report. The province requires all local governments to have a housing needs report. They required that by April of last year and was required to be updated every 5 years. It was just less than a year and a half ago when council received the district's first housing needs report. That was December 2021. And it provided an overview of housing needs in the district, the different types of need, and projections for the number of dwelling units to meet that need over 5 and 10 years. This current housing needs report was based The 2021 report was based on data from the 2016 census. That was the best available at the time. But staff anticipated that this housing needs report would be updated once the current census 2021 data was made available. So the report on the agenda tonight, the housing needs report, incorporates new data from the 2021 census and the approved regional growth strategy for Metro Vancouver. There is still information coming from the census, the undercount, for example, as well as some custom information that we have not received yet. This updated housing needs report estimates the housing need in the district to be just over 3,000 units, 3,144 units over the next 5 years, so going to 2028 now. We know that there is still a pressing need for more rental housing in the district and a balance of housing types that accommodate smaller households and households with families. These are reflected in the revised housing needs report, along with the continued emphasis on housing for low to moderate income households. Legislation from the province stipulates that to update a housing needs report, it must be approved by council, received by council in an open council meeting, and posted on the district's website, and a summary form provided to the province. I do want to point out an error that we noted on page 196 of the agenda in Appendix D. It's the table about the distribution of different age categories in the province. Unfortunately, we made some quick transposition of percentages there, and we apologize for that. We will correct that and publish it on our website tomorrow. And there is a on-table handout for council that identifies where those percentages need to be corrected. Our apologies for that. Because of that, we have a revised recommendation, and that is that the District of North Vancouver's Housing Needs Report, Attachment 1 to the July 5th, 2023 report of the Senior Community Planner, entitled Housing Needs Report Update, as corrected, is received for information and published on the district's website. Thank you so much, Your Worship. Staff are available to answer any questions or comments council may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Advo. So I'll be moving that recommendation, which is the corrected version. Is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Hanson. Just my own comments on it. This is obviously a byproduct of census data. As we get updated information, we want to keep our reports as current and up to date as possible. I get a bit frustrated from time to time when we go through a census period and it takes forever for the census data to be rolled out. It would seem to me, since the vast majority of people in this country are filling it out online, that you should be able to get a relatively accurate, relatively precise report out within hours, not within years. But unfortunately, that is the current process, that the different reports are doled out over a long period of time, which means they are by definition inaccurate at the time they're adopted by the municipality. So while it may be a better representation of the people people's responses at the time that the census was taken, it's now out of date by 24 months. And so I don't think we've landed right on that trade-off. I think that we need to get the information updated sooner in the process, rather than trying to wait and try to get all of the long forms returned and reviewed and everything. I just don't see the benefit of that trade-off. And so I certainly at every opportunity encourage our census group to offer a preliminary report based on the electronic data they receive immediately. Even that alone will help municipalities make decisions. Over the last 24 months, we could have been making decisions based on that data. And so I did just want to comment on that. But I think it's reasonable for us to be updating our reports based on the latest data possible. It doesn't in any way mean that the council can't make decisions on density that are faster than this, slower than this, all this. There's no direct relationship necessarily to what we have to deliver in our community. It's something that we report back out to the community as being the general trend in our community and representation of different unit sizes and mix and different affordability levels and such. And it certainly helps us make decisions, but it's not It doesn't compel the municipality to make specific decisions. So I think it's important for us to have the most up-to-date information we possibly can in the housing needs report. Councillor Hanson, you were the seconder on the matter.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for all of staff's work in preparing this document and the statistical analysis contained in this report. One thing I do note with respect to the demographic update, I mean, the clear trend is growth in the proportion of North Vancouverites who are 65 and older, and an even greater percentage growth in North Vancouverites 85 and older. And if one looks at the demographic bulge of the baby boom, essentially people my age, it's very predictable to forecast how the age demographics of the district are going to progress over time. So I just emphasize that because clearly when we contemplate future housing needs, we're going to have to contemplate the needs of an ever aging population of North Vancouverites. In that regard, although we're working from the census data available, I do look forward to what's described as the custom census data. More detail, the better, I think, in terms of understanding the demographic makeup if we're talking about the need for housing. So with that, I note the figure of 3,144 new units. I appreciate how approximate such a forecast has to be, but I appreciate that we have some sort of a guidepost. And I thank you, staff, for the report and for the information. And I'm happy to vote in favor of this housing needs report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. I see no further speakers at this time. Oh, Councillor Pope.
Thank you very much. I also will echo what you said about the delayed reporting in the census. It is frustrating and doesn't accurately reflect what's happened in the last 2 years in terms of the housing market and the lack of people moving here because of the housing market. And that's my other concern about the housing needs report. I think, in fact, it could be quite, the numbers could potentially be quite a bit higher were we able in some scientific way to factor in all the people who have never moved here because they haven't been able to afford to live here. Additionally, all of the people who are the young people that we do know are moving out of the district because they can't afford to live here. And that is reflected in the numbers. And I note that in the report, it says the share of adults aged 25 to 44 has decreased from 24% in 2006 to 21% in 2016. But it actually, this report doesn't have what it is up until 2021, or I wasn't able to find it in the report. That's on page 70. My question actually is about the numbers at the end of the day. So there will be a need for an estimated 77,056 new units across the board. So am I to understand that approximately we need 3,500 new units before 2026 and then another 3,500 units before 2031?
Ms. Atha?
Thank you very much to Councillor Pope through the mayor. The current housing needs report looks at the time 5 years from 2023 to 2028 and estimates the 3,144 units over those 5 years. I think that the number you're referring to, the 7,056, is over the 10-year time period in the current 2021 housing needs report. So the 2021 housing needs report went from 2021 to 2031 and broke it down at 5 years, which would have been 2026. Now that we're in 2023, we're kind of moved forward a few years with the methodology we've used in the housing needs report. The total is the 3,144.
Bit confusing, but thank you for that explanation.
If I might add as well, the current housing needs report, the roughly 7,000 units over 10 years, the current housing needs report also realized or acknowledged the number of housing units that council had approved that were in process. and then factored that in as well to come up with that lower number over the 10 years. But just want to be clear that the current report looked at the 10 years in 2 5-year bunches, if you will, but the current is just the 5 years. So the numbers are different because of those timeframes.
Okay, thank you. And my other comment was just to pick up on what Councillor Hanson has noted that seems very noteworthy in this report, that our seniors population is growing and it's going to be increasing, and the supports that we need for that will be significant in the coming years in terms of housing, which flows into my motion later tonight.
Thank you very much. I see no further speakers at this time, so I'm going to call a question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay. On to item 8.3, the Housing Accelerator Fund application. Okay, and I believe we have Alexandra to present on this item tonight.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has issued a one-time call for a new federal grant program, the Housing Accelerator Fund. The application call for the district opened on July 4th and will close on August 18th. The Housing Accelerator Fund aims to incentivize municipalities to implement work that would help bring new housing units to building permit stage over the short and medium term, so 3 years and 10 years respectively. If selected, funding bonuses would be available for affordable housing units, for transit-oriented housing units, and for housing units that address the missing middle. The application requires an action plan of 7 current or upcoming initiatives. Each initiative will be evaluated for its impact to housing supply, impact to the housing system, and timely implementation. Staff proposed that the district's action plan initiatives draw from the list of topics presented in this report. These topics have been supported by Council either through plans and policies or by earlier Council direction. Upon Council support of the initiative topics presented this evening, staff will develop the 7 detailed initiatives that will deliver the strongest application. Staff are available to answer any further questions that Council may have.
Right, thank you very much. Council, looking for your direction on this. Councillor Back. The motion. I'll second the motion. Councillor Back, your comments.
No extensive comment other than to say that any kind of a program like this, I think where we can see some support for more housing, that's especially it's aligned with many of the other initiatives that were already underway. I totally support. So happy to support, move it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm happy to support it as well. Although, you know, I did want to just point out that one of the shortfalls of it is I think it gives the impression that it's an affordability fund, that it's going to be directed towards affordability. And if you do the math on it, it only works out to be about $3,000 a door. This is really about speeding up the proposals and about having resources there to make it so that a project can get through the process faster. It's not designed to lower and have an affordable housing component on the back end where you have a per door subsidy to it. This is about assisting them through the process. And so I'm a bit frustrated because I know that the federal government and the provincial government are applying a lot of pressure to municipalities to produce housing at an affordable rate in our community, but they're not sending the resources to support it. And so the expectation is that on top of municipalities providing police, fire, ambulance, parks, utilities, sewers, all of the things that we do with our 8 cents out of every tax dollar. That's right, 92 cents out of every tax dollar goes to the provincial and federal government, and only 8 cents of every tax dollar goes to municipalities. That we have to, on top of that now, be the provider of affordable housing in our community. And so I'm frustrated with the provincial and federal government that they're putting this pressure on municipalities, blaming municipalities, and not putting the resources in place from their 92 cents out of every tax dollar in order to be able to actually make the new housing in our community much more affordable and approachable for people. Attainable, I think, is the new word the provincial government is using. So I did just want to say that this is focused on the soft costs and processing of getting an application through, it does not actually lower the per door cost on the back end. And we're going to have to still be advocates to the provincial government, to CMHC, BC Housing, and all of the other agencies in order to be able to try and get these other agencies to actually lower the per door costs in our community. So happy to support it, but at the same time, I think it doesn't go anywhere near far enough to actually produce affordability in our communities. I don't see any further speakers at this time. I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item 8.4, this is the proposed coach house program improvements. And I believe we have Ryan Gilmore here to comment on this.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Maybe I'll just start off for a moment, if that's okay, while we get the system set up. It was 2014 when council first adopted a coach house program, if you will, and the decision was to kind of go slow, a gradual approach. All coach house applications needed a variance. 6 years later, in 2020, council amended the process to allow one-story coach houses and certain conditions to go right to a building permit, as well which required still two-story coach houses, or coach houses that didn't meet initial criteria would all come to council for a variance. So this next step is a evolution in the coach house program. I'd like to turn it over now, with your permission, to my colleague, Ryan Gilmore.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Good evening, Mayor and Council. This report and proposed bylaw amendments aim to improve the district's coach house program, consistent with the findings from the public engagement process undertaken last year. These findings were discussed at the council workshop on February 13th, and those options discussed included permitting coach houses and suites on single-family lots, ways to improve coach house approval processes, and the recommendations before you this evening are informed by those discussions. The proposed changes described in this report include allowing a secondary suite on a lot where a coach house is permitted, except if the lot is located within one of our 4 priority growth centers intended for higher densities. Allowing two-story coach houses by increasing the maximum permitted height. Amending the off-street parking regulations to require only one additional parking space when the lot includes both a coach house and a secondary suite. And finally, delegating select coach house related variance applications to staff in an effort to streamline the application approval process. Staff recommends that the bylaw amendments be given first reading and are referred to public hearing. Further, an additional review of coach house regulations in the fall will focus on the criteria that determine on which lots coach houses are currently permitted, including reviewing minimum lot depth, width, and vehicle access requirements. And staff are proposing to bring forward options for a council workshop once the anticipated provincial legislation is introduced in the fall that may impact those recommendations. So staff are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Councillors Back and Hanson. Councillor Back, will you be moving the motion?
Yes, Your Worship, I will move the motion.
Councillor Hanson, seconder. Thank you. Councillor Back, your comments, please.
Thank you very much. Really pleased to see this report come back after we have had a number of discussions. I mean, certainly over the course of the last term, we made these changes to our coach house program, and most recently the workshop in the spring. I've always been very supportive of coach houses. I think they represent a way to increase housing in single family neighborhoods, which is largely what the District of North Vancouver is zoned for. I think one of the several of the challenges of our current coach house program are being addressed with this update. I think having the ability for homeowners to potentially have a secondary suite and a coach house on one lot is a move in the right direction, much like the City of North Vancouver has been permitting for a long time, as well as revising the parking requirements. I think that has been a drawback for a lot of people that want to build a coach house. So overall, I'm just happy with the direction that this is going. We've been very supportive as a council for any of the coach house applications that have come forward to council with variances. So to be able to delegate more of this to staff, I think just makes sense to kind of streamline this and move some of these projects along. I think there are other obstacles potentially when people are building coach houses. I know I've talked to a couple of homeowners, just recently who had the coach house approved. In one case, it was over a year ago, and they're still dealing with unexpected issues that have come up throughout the course of the project. So I think the more we can be clear with applicants upfront about everything that they need to do and clear checklist, the better, because we want to see more of this type of housing in the district. So very supportive to give this first reading.
Thank you, Councillor Back. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I don't have too much to add. I won't repeat the changes that are being proposed. I do note that since 2014, since our coach house policy came into effect, we've only had 37 coach house approvals. And I'm optimistic, as Councillor Back is also optimistic, that perhaps these changes may make it easier to build coach houses, and we may in fact see more coach houses. I have sat on council through the entirety of the coach house program, which has to begin with involved all coach houses coming before council for approval, and then more recently only a portion. There is widespread support for coach houses. For the most part, council has approved almost every coach house that's come before us. And I believe that the changes that are proposed in the proposed coach house program improvements draw from the experience of the coach house proposals that have come before this council over the last 9 years. So very much looking forward to this moving forward, and look forward to hearing from the public with respect to, in a public hearing with respect to these changes.
Yeah, so just my own comments on it. I mean, while I'm generally supportive of it, I have some concerns. I don't think it's right to pre-approve two-story secondary suites necessarily. I think it's a reasonable feature of single-family neighborhoods generally is that you have a relatively private backyard. So to all of a sudden have a two-story building come up alongside your backyard, that does have some privacy implications. I mean, I certainly don't want to have it faced off against housing a person, but a single floor building can house the person just as well. In fact, it's actually a more efficient use of the building, maybe not the land, but the building, because the problem is when you go to a second story, you obviously have to take a component out of that 500 square feet to do a stairwell and all of that infrastructure. So you're basically eating into the buildable space in there because you've decided that you want to have a stairwell. Generally speaking, I think it was noted that it's 37 since the program began. I don't think the biggest hangup has been regulation. The biggest hangup by far is cost. To get contractors to build 400 square foot, 500 square foot unit in their backyard is immensely expensive. In fact, it rivals house costs because it has all separate infrastructure to build it. It still has its own sewer line. It still has its own servicing connections, and it's incredibly expensive. So for comparison, last year, this council approved 1,600 units of multifamily versus I think about 8 of coach houses and laneways just in the last year. And so it's not going to be a significant source of housing in our community. I get that there are certainly circumstances where it makes sense when a family member wants to move into the unit and free the house up for other family, and I'm all for removing barriers to multi-generational housing in our community, and this can be a way to do that. But just simply by the numbers, it is more environmentally efficient for us to build multifamily and proper multifamily sites. It is more efficient for delivery of municipal services. It is more efficient for the cost for production of the unit. The per door cost when it's built in a proper multifamily is lower. Therefore, the price that you can actually rent it for with a reasonable return on investment is the math works a whole lot better in a proper rental facility than it does in this. And so I don't ever see it being a very significant source of our housing relative to proper planned multifamily development and town center development in our community. But again, I don't necessarily want it to have barriers to it in either case. I'm willing to support this going to public hearing, but at this point, I'm probably not going to be supportive of fast tracking the second floor developments because I think that they are more problem than they're worth in terms of the housing space. I think you can better accommodate the housing space on one floor with such a small footprint rather than committing so much of it to building a second piece of infrastructure upstairs and everything. So I'm not, plus the impact on privacy as well. So I'll be supportive of this at this point, but I have to say, unless there's other innovative ways to manage and make sure that there's still eyes on the issue of privacy in properties, I probably will not be supportive of it going beyond that point without some amendment to it. But I think that it's fair for us to have the conversation. I just want to be clear. I believe Councillor Hanson has spoke. Not everybody's been cleared from the speakers list. So I believe it's Catherine Pope and Betty Forbes next. Councillor Pope, your comments?
I think one of the reasons why we started talking about enabling the second stories was because of the problems that have come up with previous applications, with people having to have all of their parking on site around the coach house, and that led to all kinds of other problems that we heard from homeowners who were wanting to develop coach houses. And so I'm a little bit disappointed to see that there isn't more here in terms of flexibility with parking surrounding the coach houses and on-street parking, and allowing some more flexibility that way, so that we can just make it easier for people to build coach houses. I would like to see more coach houses built on single family lots. Yeah, no, it's not a grand solution to our housing crisis problem, but it's a step. And I think it's a good step. And the other thing I think that's missing here is I'm not seeing anything about pre-approved designs, which would also speed things up. And in speeding things up, let's face it, that keeps costs down. So the other factor was a homeowner that I met with who wants to build 2 coach houses on his 2 side-by-side properties. And he wants to, but he's only got like 33 feet, and we have to have a minimum of 50 feet apparently. So I had hoped to see something about that in here. And I note that it's the part of the next review with the coach house program, but again, the slowness, like I wish we could just move a little more quickly and get that in this round so that we can have that comprehensive discussion about it now and make it easier for homeowners to have coach houses and enable their families and nannies and grandparents and anybody else they want to live on their property. Those are my comments.
Okay. Councillor Pope, Councillor Forbes, your comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with a lot of things that you said, but could you clarify? Are you saying that you're not in favor for the last 2 items that aren't going to public hearing?
Which 2 items are those?
It's up on screen, the last 2, because they just say first reading. They don't.
No, I don't have a problem with those. I mean, obviously stemming from that, it's whether you would hand over the ability to vary to a second floor. But the questions of siting, setback, minor variances, and I don't consider second floor a minor variance, we'd be still deferring, giving the authority to the staff to act on that.
Thank you. I have about 3 questions for staff. What is covered under a minor variance as opposed to a regular variance?
Mr. Gilmore?
Thank you. Through the mayor.
For the coach house variances, we're considering citing setbacks, bedroom and living room size, parking and pedestrian access, all under the minor variance category. So that would leave bigger variances that tend to affect lot eligibility in the more major variance category that would still come to council. So that'd be things like lot width, lot depth, lot area, and the most common variance we see, which is vehicle access. That's when the lot doesn't have laneway access or isn't a corner lot, where we have to vary the access to make the lot eligible.
Mr.
Thank
Milford,
you.
additional comments?
Just to clarify a comment made earlier, the proposal before you indicates that the proposal we're recommending go to a public hearing for consideration does include 2-story coach houses on certain lots that are in the category. And so those wouldn't require a variance either from council or from staff. It would be a right of use. And then Ryan just went over the various additional minor variances that could be delegated to staff as well. But 2-story is proposed to be a right of use in the bylaw before council for recommended public hearing.
So parking and second stories are specifically mentioned in the report because you don't see them as minor variances, but you do want them to be considered.
To be considered as bylaw amendments
to
become rights of use, yes.
Okay, we've had a number of, or I've been involved with a number of these requests coming forward to council. And council had reasons why council wanted to still have some say in the second story. As the mayor has said, it has to do with privacy and a number of other things. Also, we've had citizens come before us where staff has required them to take away their parking that they already have on their lot and have required them to put parking, say, on the laneway instead of at the front. And it was council that has, I can think of 2 specific applicants. It was council who asked, do you want to keep your parking you currently have? Yes, we do. So it was council that caught that. So I have a bit of a problem with letting 2-story go to a staff decision or parking, because I've seen incidences that have come up and council has had a good discussion with the applicant and we've changed the requirement for that applicant. So the citing is another thing, because council had said that we didn't want these in the front yard, but I would think now we've had 2 of those as well. And because of the way the lot is situated and the growth, the plants and trees around where they wanted to situate it in their front yard, it wasn't really that noticeable from the street. So there were 2 exceptions where we did allow front yard accommodating that. So there are situations that you can't just make a broad brush for. They need to be looked at individually. And I feel council's made an impact on doing that. We've looked at things individually. Also, coach houses aren't a solution, as everybody's already said, to affordable housing. What they are a bit of a solution for is generational housing, and for perhaps, nannies or things like that, that are the use of the family that's living in the principal residence. And they're not cheap. They're about $500,000 to build, 450, 500,000 to build. So it's not a cheap way to get an investment property and make money off it. It's going to take you years to make that money back if you're doing it as an investment. So it is more a family thing, and I'm all for coach houses for that reason. And I think that's why we have so few of them, is because usually it's a choice to have family close at hand, whether it be an elderly relative or something close at hand, so you can take care of them and mind them. So I don't agree with the 2-story being not dealt with by council, or the parking. And I think we've shown that we've made a difference on variances that we have granted in the past. So I'm not in favor of, I'm in favor of the first reading if that doesn't include those two things. But if I understand correctly, it does now. Parking and second story do include if we go forward.
They would be referred to the public hearing for discussion, and a
Yep.
second and third reading. The council would have the ability to amend it at that time if they were not satisfied with it, but it would go to public hearing with that included.
Okay,
Current motion on the floor.
thank you.
Can I just get a clarification? I think Councillor Forbes, you said it correctly, but I just want to be clear about it. When you say a minor variance to siding, you're not referring to it being in the front yard necessarily. You're talking about it being moved around the general area with, but generally still in the backyard of a property. Is that correct? And a variance that includes it being moved to the front or side yard would still be something that would require a variance by council.
Your worship, that's correct. I wouldn't define that as a minor variance under the delegation of authority. There may be some language in the report which suggests, I think inappropriately, that citing in the front yard would be part of that consideration. However, that is not a minor variance. That is a significant change. And so that, in my mind, that would have to be with council's discretion. Yeah.
By case basis. Okay, thank you. Councillor Back, your comments?
That's the one from before, sorry.
Okay. All right, I see no further speakers at this time, so I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries. Okay, next item up for discussion is the short-term rentals regulatory framework. And again, we're going to Mr. Gilmore for comment. Unless Ms. Atfa, do you have opening comments? So straight to Mr. Gilmore, there you go.
Thank you, Mayor Little. This next item proposes a regulatory framework enforcement approach and draft bylaws for short-term rentals based on public input undertaken last year. Findings from that public engagement and options for a regulatory framework were discussed at council workshops on April 17th and May 8th of this year. And the recommendations before you this evening are informed by those discussions with council. The proposed regulatory framework and enforcement approach described in the report include allowing short-term rentals in all housing types, permitting short-term rentals in principal residence dwelling units only, requiring short-term rental operators to obtain and display a valid business license, allowing owners or tenants with owner's permission to apply for a business license, requiring one off-street parking space for a short-term rental unit, establishing emergency contact and safety standards for short-term rentals, and lastly, creating new fines to aid with enforcement. The proposed regulatory framework requires amendments to 4 separate bylaws: the zoning bylaw, business license bylaw, fees and charges bylaw, and bylaw notice of enforcement bylaw. Staff recommend that bylaw amendments be given first reading and are referred to a public hearing, and staff are here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Hanson, your hand is up. Would you like to be moving a recommendation?
I will.
Recommendation? Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Second by Councillor Back. Your comments, Councillor Hanson?
Thank you very much. Thank you, staff, for preparing this comprehensive document. I'm pleased to support these bylaw changes going to public hearing, and I look forward to hearing from the public. I do believe the proposal is reasonable. The key to the proposal that's put forward is the principal residence requirement. It's a simple scheme that is advanced. It says that anyone can use any type of property as a vacation rental, so long as it's the property that they live in. And the vision is that one would live in one's home, one would leave for perhaps a holiday, and while they're on vacation would rent out their property as a principal or as a vacation rental with all of these other requirements that have been described. I think some work may need to go into the definition of principal residence. As much as in our minds we think, well, that's where you live, that's where you spend almost all your time and you go away. And there's this definition that's put forward: the usual place where an individual lives, make their home, and conduct their daily affairs, paying their bills and receives their mail. I'm concerned that there may be groups of people who will take advantage of this principal residence definition, say that in fact a property is their principal residence and yet rent it out for perhaps 6 months a year, which if they did so isn't, in my view, within the spirit of the proposal that's put forward. And I wonder if in the end, we're going to have to land on some numerical definitions of principal residence. How much time do you live in a property to make it principal residence? And perhaps on the other side, are there some limits to the amount of time that you can rent out the property as a vacation rental? I know in the current scheme that's proposed, there's no limitations of that type, but perhaps to comply with the philosophy which is underlying this scheme, we are in the end going to have to consider some limitations. But I'll leave that. Another comment that I'd make is I see that there's the 3% tax, which is going to the Affordable Housing Fund. And I understand that's the most that we're allowed due to provincial legislation. In my mind, when I was contemplating a legalized and regulated format for vacation rentals, I was actually thinking of a taxation level of more than 3%. So perhaps the provincial government will reconsider that, because I think the potential for profit to the owner is very significant. There is going to be some disruption to the community, and I do think it makes sense that that be compensated with a benefit to the community through a taxation scheme of perhaps more than 3%. But with those caveats and concerns, I do think it's a reasonable scheme. I applaud the simplicity of the proposal, and I do believe that we're all going to be better off when we bring vacation rentals out of the shadows and legalize and regulate them in a way which is manageable for all concerned. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Back as a seconder.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. This is an issue that's been debated over the last term of council, as well as the report states, starting in 2017, when we first started to consider a regulatory framework for short-term rentals. There is a balance that has to be struck between, promoting short-term rentals, which we know have a benefit for our community, for the tourism. We have a lack of hotel rooms in the district and across the North Shore. So short-term rentals certainly help fill a need there. But at the same time, we don't want them to have a negative impact on long-term rental housing, which is also at a very, we have very little of in the district as well. So I think this does strike the right balance. Some of the aspects that I like that we've landed on is that we are going to be permitting short-term rentals in all housing types. At one time, it was just looking at possibly single-family homes or owned versus rental, and this is really opening it up to all housing types. And I think that, as Councillor Hansen has pointed out, the principal residence piece is really key to making sure that we are protecting our long-term rental housing. So overall, I think this is going in the right direction, and that's why I'm supportive of sending it to public hearing.
Just to say, so just for my comments, I'm actually not supportive of this. I think it goes the wrong direction. I think that commodifying our housing for short-term rentals is a mistake that we'll regret in future. This is going to cut into long-term rental supply in our community as new people build or as new people buy a house, and they have an option to make more revenue off of short-term insecure rentals. Rather than actually giving reliable long-term rentals in the community. I think that's a mistake. I think we will regret it. And I don't think it strikes a balance at all. I mean, this option A means it's available in all these properties, and it's without caps and limits. Therefore, it's basically made it absolutely lucrative to get into the small short-term rental business, and it's going to chase out long-term rentals. They're going to be the ones that get hit in it. I mean, obviously, the municipality has some tools at our disposal to help assist long-term rentals in other ways. We are obviously pursuing purpose-built rentals in our town centers with new development and trying to provide for those options for people in other spaces. But I think that this doesn't strike a balance in my view, because it gives too much of an advantage to the short-term rental provider and makes it less likely that they'll provide their unit for long-term rentals in our community through a secondary market. So I'm not supportive of it. When it goes through, if it goes through to public hearing, I'll absolutely still be open-minded and listen to the community on the issue. But that's the hurdle, is I don't think I can be supportive of something that is going to harm long-term rentals in our community. And I think that's what this will do. So I think you have to have some cap. Whether I think if I were designing it all myself, I would have said that you could rent the unit for at most 10 weeks of the year. That gives people an opportunity to rent it out while they vacation, but it doesn't incentivize it enough to scare away long-term rentals. If somebody has the space available, it still would make more sense for them to get an annual tenant than it would for them to get a 10-week short-term contract. So I don't think it's landed in the right spot. I won't be supportive of it at this time. Councillor Forbes, your comments.
I had a good presentation all ready to go, but it was on my computer and I forgot to bring my computer. So just the very essence of what I was going to say was that there was a newspaper article that just came out in the last week, and I posted it on my personal Facebook page. And it was all to do with City of Vancouver since they approved short-term rental. And the gist of it came down to exactly what you're talking about. This is commodifying our homes, just like the international market has done. And it has cost us long-term rental. That's why we're desperately looking for rental now. And one of the stats is they quoted, and this, I could be off a little bit, but a year ago, the 2021 stats, there was approximately just over 2,000 short-term rentals. And in 2022, there's over 4,000. Now that they've legalized it, there's over 4,000 short-term rentals. And by approximately the same amount, the long-term rental went down. So the numbers are there. The data is starting to come in that when you commodify short-term, you hurt long-term. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, is establish long-term rental for the district. So I'm not in favor of this either.
Thank you very much. Councillor Back, second comments?
Sorry, Worship, I keep leaving my indicator on there.
It may have something stuck on there or something, because I
does.
think it's queued it a few times on its own.
Yeah.
You just wave me off if there. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much. I want to push back a little bit on the concept that we're going to be drawing off of the long-term rentals. I respect the data that's been put forward from Vancouver and the comment, but it seems to me, if the principal residence requirement is properly defined and properly enforced, that it will not draw away from long-term rentals. Because if in fact we're talking about properties that people live in, they're not going to rent those properties out for long-term rentals because they live in them. The philosophy here is the person lives in the property, therefore it's not available for long-term rentals, but they take gaps in their occupation, such as for holidays. And during those gaps, it is, as Councillor Back said, in the best interest of our community to make those available to visitors so they can come to our community, bring their vacation dollars, and participate in our economy. So I return to the proposition that if we get the principal residence requirement right, and that's properly understood and enforced, I believe that is the underpinning of this policy. And I believe it does allow us to strike the right balance and not draw away from long-term rentals.
Councillor Forbes.
I just remembered some more of my presentation. One of the things that was pointed out was enforcement's very difficult to do. Another thing that was pointed out is there are people, very smart, witty people that have managed to find the loopholes. And in Vancouver, there's one fellow that runs approximately 140 short-term rentals. And we're not talking about in apartment building. He waits till the principal residence gets their licensing, and then he offers his services in order to get the short-term rental filled. So the homeowner doesn't have to really go out and do much work except when the person comes and leaves. So there are people making money off of this on sidelines and through loopholes. So I think that there's too much of that can happen in here. I respect public hearing and listening to the public, but it's very, very dangerous to go down this road, and Vancouver's already showing us that.
May I just ask for a clarification from staff on Councillor Hansen's comment about, is your understanding that in order to be able to retain it as a principal residence under the definition, that there's no way they could rent it more than 26 weeks of the year? Is that your understanding of it? Or can someone be the principal residence of the whole house and rent out a portion of the house for no cap throughout the house?
Perhaps I'll start by just reading the definition, but I think I can answer your question. So we're defining the principal residence to mean the usual place where an individual lives, makes their home, conducts their daily affairs, including without limitation, paying bills, receiving mail, and uses the address and documentation related to billing, identification, taxation, and insurance purposes. So I guess a simpler definition would be where somebody lives most of the time. There could be scenarios where somebody has multiple properties, but does live in a home most of the time, but it's less, perhaps less than half a year. I think that would be unusual, but it could happen. I think one thing that's important to maybe note is that when we talk about a single family context, we have the principal unit, let's say the upstairs, we have the secondary suite, let's say in the basement, and or a coach house. The secondary suite and the coach house would be treated as separate dwellings. And the way we structured the requirements before you, only one license would be permitted per premises. So if the principal resident of the primary unit in the main house wanted to short-term rental their dwelling, they could get a license, but the secondary suite and the coach house could not. Or vice versa. If the owner of the home was okay with their tenant, their long-term tenant, getting a short-term rental license, and they signed off on an application for a short-term rental license for the secondary suite, the primary dwelling above the owner, or perhaps a coach house on the same property would not be able to get a license. So we're limiting it to one license and always just to the principal resident. So I don't know if that complicates or clarifies.
No, but sorry, just on the specific issue, you're contemplating a max of half a year? Because it sounds like there's some workarounds that I'd be a little bit concerned about, that without you explicitly saying a 26-week cap. That being that the principal resident, let's say it has 2 spaces in it, then the person could have it for half a year in one part of the house and half a year in the other part of the house. Or if the person is generally the principal dwelling of the entire house, which happens in the vast majority of our single family houses, and they decide to rent out their basement as a vacation, as a short-term rental space, technically it's part of the whole house that they are the principal resident in, because they don't have it as a separate dwelling unit for the bulk of the year. Can that person just consistently be renting it out, or is there a hard cap under what's proposed?
Mr. Milburn, I think you wanted to start.
I'll just start, maybe Ryan can jump in. In terms of the definition of principal residence, we've tried to draw on some definitions that have been used in the province for some time, and there's been some court cases around those definitions as well. And so if this item advances to public hearing, we'll bring forward that information on the experience of other communities and in the courts and what's been upheld in terms of how that definition gets applied. And I think it is important that if it's a principal residence, this is a place that you're occupying most. and more than half the year. I think that's the general understanding. But of course, I think we'll want to bring forward further advice that we know from the court decisions that have been applied around this at the public hearing, if this matter advances to that stage.
Okay. Well, I still think it's going to put a target on the back of long-term rentals in our community. And it sounds like there's just a tremendous amount of workarounds, and you've heard in other municipalities that people are operating it as a business, 140 suites by one person, and that's not the intent. And all of those spaces could otherwise be potential for long-term rentals in the community. And so I'm not supportive of this at this time. I believe the next speaker is Councillor Pope.
Thank you very much. I have to say I started off feeling very supportive of this motion, but I'm really concerned and picking up on what you've said about the long-term rentals and whether that will compromise the amount that we have or that we want to have in the district. And so I don't quite know where to go with this. I scanned that Vancouver Sun article, and I'm trying to remember if in fact they had a clause in the city of Vancouver, and maybe Mr. Milburn knows. Did they have the clause in there about ensuring that it was the principal homeowner? Is that the same?
That's correct, Worship.
Yeah, they did. And still so many problems. Yeah. I don't know. I feel like we need to have a little more discussion on this. Not sure which way to go with it, to be honest with you, at this moment in time.
Unfortunately, I have no other speakers for you. I don't have a lot of deliberation time for you. I'm going to have to press to the question. But I think we've at least set out that this is not a fait accompli. There's going to be some discussion as this matter goes forward one way or another. So, but I'm prepared to call the question on the motion. And to be clear, the motion on the floor is in favor of the staff recommendation, which is to give first reading and move to a public hearing on the matter. So I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion carries 3-2, and with Councillors Forbes and Mayor Little opposed. And yeah, it's a tricky issue because I don't think anyone around this council wants to accidentally put a target on long-term rentals in the community. I've heard all of your comments in public and everything, and we definitely don't want to have that be an unintended consequence of it. And so maybe a little more work and we can find a way to get consensus on it. The next item that we have up for discussion is item 8.6. This is a council report on fireworks and smoke generating pyrotechnic devices ban, and the author is Councillor Hanson. So your motion, if you'd like to move it, and if you want some, is there a seconder on? Second by Councillor Pope. So go ahead, Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very pleased this occasion to be bringing this motion calling for a complete fireworks ban in the District of North Vancouver. This would align our policy with that in the City of North Vancouver. It would also align our policy with the majority of local governments in the Metro Vancouver region who have firework bans. A firework ban has existed in the City of North Vancouver since 2009. I accept that for some persons, fireworks may be seen as innocent and fun and part of our community's traditions. I have heard that. However, that must be placed against significant harms caused to pets, especially older dogs, significant harms caused to wildlife, harms to vulnerable residents, especially those suffering post-traumatic stress disorders, but also other types of psychological vulnerabilities, an overarching harm to our environment, and a significant fire risk. And this is something, the fire risk wasn't perhaps emphasized as much as I could have emphasized it in the report. But if we reflect on the fact that we could have a very dry October, and with changes to our weather due to climate change, anything is possible. Fireworks could very literally be the spark that sets our district on fire. In my view, other local governments have followed the correct path in banning fireworks, and the time has come for us to follow suit. I would observe that based on my community outreach, and I believe also any surveys that have been done, a ban on fireworks is supported by a majority of our community's residents. So I do hope that I will have council support in passing this motion and placing the district in the good company of other local governments that have banned fireworks across Metro Vancouver. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Pope.
Thank you very much. I fully support this motion. I think its time has come. We are overdue as a district for banning fireworks, and I appreciate that people enjoy them. I used to enjoy them, but the evidence is overwhelming that our pets are really harmed by this, and the animals in the wild. And it's just one of the first things that happened when I came on councils was that we got a huge amount of people writing us after October 31st. I don't know, dozens, maybe a few hundred emails from people who were upset about the fireworks and telling us stories about how much it had caused problems in their lives for pets taking off and being afraid and frightened. And so I think with all of those things considered and the other factors, including the fire factor that Councillor Hanson has mentioned, that it is time to ban fireworks in North Van. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to vote in favor of this motion. Previously, I had voted against it, but after reconsideration, I do think that I'm concerned about the wildlife. Even if you can manage your own pets, I have never had a problem with my pets with fireworks, my dogs or my cats or anything, but it's the uncontrolled circumstances, and so I'm in favor of that. But I do want to point out one thing. One of the reasons that I didn't vote to ban them the first time this appeared was because some people think that this is going to be a solution to all the things that they email us about, as Councillor Pope has said, and it's not going to be a solution, because usually the people who are doing the things that cause so much headache are not the people that just want to light off some fireworks and go home and have a hot chocolate. And so that's not going to change that segment of behavior in our population. I live by Kirkstone. Kirkstone Park was infamous for years about the Kirkstone Wars, and you would have hordes of people face off on each side of the field. My roof was lit on fire once when I had a shake roof. So I'm in favor of this, but I don't want it to be a false sense that this is not going to happen anymore, because that segment will continue to do it. And as long as we have the Squamish and the Tsleil-Waututh selling fireworks on their lands, people are going to buy them from them, and they're just going to come into our community, and that's going to be a problem. So I really wish we could do something about working with Tsleil-Waututh and the Squamish Nation to see if we can do something about them not selling them as well. But as far as the district, I think it's time. This is coming. I'm in favor of this.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to add my own comments to this. I'm not going to be supportive of the motion, in part because I think that this is a beloved cultural activity in our community. It's not something you find in Ontario. It's something you find out here. It's something that's been semi-uniquely British Columbia, having fireworks at Halloween. And it's, the last time we had this discussion, and this discussion has come back year in, year out. I remember, talking about the impact on pets. And I had to say, we're a 2-pet household with 2 dogs. And I have to say they're far more agitated by someone knocking on our door than by the fireworks on Halloween. Far more affected by that, and it upsets them for a long period of time sometimes. I took our older dog Stanley out to watch the fireworks, and he just sat and watched them, and it didn't affect him. So it's just to say it's not across the board. I know it affects some pets differently than other pets, but it's not necessarily across the board. And wildlife obviously has to contend with surprises and noises in terms of predators and lightning and all these other things that are quite concerning and stressful too. It's very hard for us to manage stress in the wildlife population in general. We're talking about the 4-hour window a year that it's legal. We're 364 days. It's not legal. We're talking about the 4 hours that it is, and the vast majority of the problem fireworks are by people who aren't following the current regulations. They're firing outside of the window. They're buying them from other places, including illegal firecrackers and explosives and things. And so they're already not complying. Putting this regulation in won't make them comply more. It's still you're still going to have that random 2 a.m. someone popping off an air bomb because they'll have the ability to both buy conventional fireworks in other areas, but also have other sources that just simply come through the ports and other illegal firecrackers that make their way into the community. I did want to address the fire concern. So last year we actually got very close to canceling the sales permit for the contractors that were going to be selling in North Vancouver because we had such a long dry period. And then as it turns out, we had a solid week of heavy rain leading up to it, and the fire chief changed his recommendation at that point and decided that we were going to go ahead. The fire chief has the power to cancel Halloween fireworks already. They have the ability to say, you know what, the conditions aren't right, this is too high of a risk, and they have the ability to make that decision, and I fully support them having that ability, as much as it would be a disappointment in certain years. We've tried different things from time to time. We tried to do a community celebration one where we had the fire department actually run a fireworks display. Unfortunately, it became a lot of risk for the municipality because it rained so heavily on some of those years that the actual fireworks display got washed out one year. The field was so soaking wet that inviting the community to stand on the field, everybody got soaked and left, and it wasn't a great experience. And so we actually went away from that after trying it out for several years. We tried it at Inter River, we tried it at Lynn Valley, and in the end, we just couldn't find a way of making a community celebration work as a viable alternative. With the people getting their own permits and having their own displays, to some degree, it protected the municipality from some of the risk of a larger community event that may or may not go off. So I'm not supportive of this. I still think it's a valued community cultural event, and I think the benefits outweigh the risks. So I'm still supportive. Councillor Back, Councillor Forbes is on the top of the Councillor Back.
Thank you, Your Worship. There's a gremlin in the system tonight because it keeps turning on its
This
own
time
here.
you would like to
Yeah.
speak though?
I actually want to speak
Okay.
now. If
Fantastic.
that's possible, Your Worship. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to repeat the comments that have been said, and you made a very fulsome comment there, Your Worship, that I agree with your position. We have had many opportunities to consider the banning of fireworks, as you've said, and every Halloween we do get a number of emails. And I certainly want to empathize with the people that we hear from whose pets are so negatively affected. I have a dog who is like your own dogs, Your Worship, is not particularly bothered by fireworks, but I know that for many pets, it's quite a traumatic experience every October. We live in a time when it's never been more important to have opportunities for community to get together and gather and connect. And for me, one of those opportunities has always been Halloween, having grown up here on the West Coast. My wife grew up in Toronto, and to your point about Ontario not having fireworks, it's not a thing there. She didn't really get it. But it certainly has been a tradition here for a very long time. And I certainly recall, every Halloween, my neighbor hosting a fireworks display with a permit, and the neighbors would come out. There would be food. There would be a get together, and it was a really positive experience. And I think something like a ban would effectively stop those kinds of neighborhood get-togethers every Halloween. I also remember the community displays at Lynn Valley Park, which you alluded to, and Inter River. I'd love to see something like that come back. But in terms of an outright ban, well, I think it sends a message. I don't think it would be at all effective in terms of curbing the kind of fireworks use that we want. So I'm not supportive for those reasons. I think that it is something that happens once a year. It's a tradition that's, and I understand that times change, but I think in this case, a ban is not going to have the sort of effect that we would like it to. So for those reasons, I won't support the recommendation.
It's unfortunate we don't have a full council here tonight, because I think it'd be great to hear the benefit of Councillor Ma and Councillor Murray's comments. Although, if memory serves correctly, I believe Councillor Murray was supportive of a ban in the last go around. I hope I've got that correct, but that's my recollection. So, what I'm also hopeful about is I do seem to recall that the Squamish Nation indicated that they were trying to wind down this as a sales opportunity within their organization. So I don't know if they've come to a resolution on that, but they seem to be willing to talk about that. But as it stands today, I think I hear that there's 3 in favor and 2 opposed. So I'm prepared to call the question on the motion. Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? The motion passes with Councillor Back and Mayor Little opposed. Yeah. Just Councillor Back and myself opposed. Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Council. We're moving on to item 8.7. This is the Lynn Valley Legion expediting affordable seniors care and worker housing. And I did just want to say I made a comment at the top end of the meeting about this. If you'd prefer, you're welcome to sit there for it. And just wanted to reiterate that there is not a current application before the district. There's one looming. There was a past application. They've made modifications to that application, and we're expecting that application to come up at some near future term. But if people, the reason why you wouldn't see development proposal signs up on the property already, which would normally indicate that change is coming to that area, is because the application hasn't been formally received yet at this time. But however, as I also said at the beginning, it's a bit of a cart and a horse question, because if you want to have a discussion about expediting a proposal, you can't have it at the midway point or end of a proposal. You have to have it as early in the process as possible. And I think that is the purpose of this report. So at this point, Councillor Pope, this is your report. If I can say, if you're going to, just check with the clerk. We do have 2 public speakers. Are we going to have them after Councillor does the initial report, or are we going to have them first? It would be appropriate to have them before. So sorry, Councillor Pope, I am actually going to call up the 2 speakers. That's okay. We do have 2 speakers signed up, one in favor, one opposed, and we'll get the benefit of their comments right away. So the first speaker I have in favor is Linda Finley, joining us here in person. And so welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council. Timed.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time. My name is Linda Findlay, and I'm speaking tonight in favor of item 8.7 on the agenda, and I truly hope that the Council passes this motion tonight. I am the president of the Royal Canadian Legion, Branch 114 Lynn Valley, a long-standing service organization that has been part of this community for an incredible 93 years. Our dedication to serving veterans, their dependents, and people of this community is unwavering, and it is our determined intention to continue the Legion's presence in Lynn Valley for generations to come. Like many Legions across the country, our membership is facing the challenge of maintaining sustainable operations while ensuring we possess the necessary resources to execute a comprehensive long-term plan. To address this crucial issue, we have invested considerable time, money, and effort collaborating with the Legion's Provincial Command, our membership, our partner Dave Wolstenholme, other service organizations, and the wider Lynn Valley community. Over the past 5 years, we have painstakingly evaluated our options by refining our vision, striving for a plan that best serves the Legion and the overall community at large. The current iteration for renewing our lands that we will be submitting for consideration offers unparalleled community benefit. This becomes even more evident when we consider that the present site merely consists of a parking lot and a small single-level cinder block building. Our proposal considers delivering community benefit in 4 ways: a sustainable new Legion with a community kitchen, a childcare facility for at least 40 children, 16 to 20 under-market rental units in perpetuity for North Shore healthcare workers, and most importantly, care housing for seniors with affordable units. It is vital for us to note that our proposal is not about market-driven products like condos, and we are not displacing anyone from their homes. We are fully committed to complying with the OCP by aligning our proposal within the zoning and allowable uses for public assembly lands once the outdated 1964 siting plan is removed. We can then move forward with greater expediency. In addition to our proposal aligns with over 50 stated goals and objectives raised by many DMV reports and committees, highlighting our dedication to fulfilling the pressing needs and aspirations of our community. Our proposal will also have a net zero impact on bridge traffic and roadway infrastructure. This is a particularly unique circumstance within our proposal, and its benefit to the community in this regard cannot be overstated. And if not here on our lands, then where? And if not now, then when? As we cannot afford to delay even further the ability to provide sorely needed seniors housing and other community benefits. In closing, we ardently request your consideration and support of this motion to provide a vital path forward. Our vision is a collective endeavor, one that seeks to uplift and strengthen the fabric of our community. Your decision tonight could pave the way forward to a future where care, compassion, and inclusivity flourish, leaving a lasting legacy for generations to come. I also want to thank Councillor Catherine Pope for taking an interest in us and really appreciate the work she's put into moving this motion forward. So thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you very much.
May I comment just briefly on some of the comments made earlier by the previous person?
No.
Okay. All right.
We're good. But there's also lots of opportunity to speak about your proposal through public hearing processes or through.
Oh, no, I was just commenting on the man that said we weren't in touch with him.
For not, thank you.
Okay, great.
The next speaker we have is Barbara Haynes. I'm going to assume Barbara Haynes is joining us virtually. Can we just confirm that Barbara Haynes has joined the meeting? I see Barb H there. Okay. Barbara Haynes, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, clearly. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Little and councillors. My name is Barbara Haynes, and I have lived in Lynn Valley for over 40 years. I have several concerns about the Legion's proposed development. To be clear, I am not opposed to development of the Legion site. However, anything built there must take into consideration the surrounding neighborhoods, neighboring homes, and be of benefit to the community. Firstly, as you've pointed out already, there is no development application on the District of North Vancouver website, and the one presented tonight is the first time many of us have seen it, including many of the public, councillors, and likely some staff. How then can this be expedited? The council member has presented this as if it has already been approved and now wants the process to move faster. The second concern is the nature of the public assembly land development that includes rental accommodation for healthcare workers. Long ago, nursing students were provided accommodation at hospitals during their training, but these rentals are for healthcare workers that may not even work at the proposed Lynn Valley Seniors Care Centre. The public assembly designation lines are becoming more blurred. If this is a seniors care housing, is it truly a long-term care center and not just rentals for seniors as required by the PA designation? If not, then a whole new set of questions arise to challenge whether the public assembly land designation is still appropriate. Thirdly, this would be a unique location for the seniors care facility in that it is surrounded by residential single-family homes on all 4 sides. Consideration needs to be made for the neighboring homes when building anything on the Legion site. Many aspects, including density, height, and proximity to the neighboring homes, are still problems that must be addressed. The presenting councillor is trying to expedite and remove the site plans and height variances that are very important to deal with, not remove. The official community plan continues to state that any development should respect the surrounding residential neighborhoods. There are many more questions that need to be answered and many more details that need to be provided. In short, much more work needs to be done on this development proposal before it is acceptable. I oppose the method in which the council member is attempting to push through something that received significant community opposition in the recent past. In bringing this presentation forward, conflict of interest has also been mentioned by many people I have spoken to. And if this is the case, then the councillor should recuse herself and not be allowed to vote now or in the future on this proposal of Legion development. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, please welcome Councillor Pope, your opening comments. And is there a seconder for Councillor Pope's motion? Seconded by Councillor Back. Okay.
Thank you very much. I need to turn this back on. Is it on?
Nope, we got it.
Okay. I think I'll address this conflict of interest first because it's just coming up and I want to stamp it out. Councillor Back and I, during the election campaign, rented some space in the parking lot to give out some brochures. We paid for the space. It's all been filed. It's all been passed, and it's all there for public information. There is no conflict of interest. And I invite anyone to go into the records to find that, as the mayor has mentioned earlier today. All right, let's move on. So the Lynn Valley Legion expediting affordable seniors care and workers housing. I was so excited when I heard about this proposal because it is so needed in our community. This is the Legion today. And it's basically a parking lot with a really old building, and it's not meeting many community needs. Right now, we know, and we've heard tonight as well, that there is an urgent need for affordable seniors care. We have a 276 bed shortage in the District of North Van for long-term care. Seniors who are no longer able to live at home because they need more care. Many of them, unless they have significant means to pay for private care, are forced to leave North Van, their family and friends. We also know that 17,000 seniors over the age of are already over the age of 65 in the District of North Van, according to the 2021 census. So it's actually more than that. And we heard tonight the housing needs report. We have an increasing percent of the population is older adults. It's not working for me. Additionally, recently the BC Seniors Advocate came out with a report called It's Time to Act, a review of assisted living in BC. And Isabel McKenzie was quoted as saying, significantly increasing the capacity of publicly subsidized assisted living programs with more units and expanded services is one of the main recommendations that came out of that report. The Legion proposal will provide between 96 and up to 144 affordable long-term care beds for seniors. Additionally, there will be another building where affordable rentals for healthcare workers can live, a daycare for children, and a new Legion and community kitchen. This gives you a rough idea of what the planning is. This is along the lower here. This is Lynn Valley Road where I've got the cursor. Building 1 is the Legion and the housing for the healthcare workers. Buildings 2 and 2 are also for the seniors care facility. And just to sort of rehash that a little bit. So this is the way it looks. Building 1 We'll have the affordable housing for healthcare workers, the children's daycare, the Legion, and the community kitchen. Building 2 will have the seniors' long-term care, assisted living, and or dementia care, depending on what gets worked out. The funding for the seniors' care building, discussions are currently underway with Vancouver Coastal Health. If Vancouver Coastal Health is not a partner in the end, the Legion commits to 30% of the units as affordable. The current timeline is lengthy, and we may not see any construction happen until 2030 if we go along with our regular planning and approval processes. The expedited timeline, according to the Legion people, they say that shovels could be in the ground by 2024. That's if we proceed in an expedited way with the planning and approval processes. If expedited, seniors and healthcare workers could move in by 2026, 27. Additionally, this project aligns with many different policies and intentions of the provincial government's current Housing Supply Act. It aligns with the District of North Van Official Community Plan, the OCP Action Plan, the Rental and Affordable Housing Strategy, and the current Housing Needs Report. We also know, of course, that the legislation requiring the District of North Van to meet housing targets is another aligned policy. I think we're a community that cares for its seniors. And so my recommendation is that staff report back on ways to expedite the Legion project and present options, including timelines, to council at the next scheduled meeting, September 11th. And I hope I have your support. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Back, you're the seconder on the motion. Would you have additional comments?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Pope, for spearheading this and bringing this motion forward tonight, which I am happy to second. I think when you look at everything that the applicant here is looking to potentially bring to this project at Legion 114, you can see that it is so aligned with the needs of this community. The demographics that we looked at in the housing needs report highlight it so clearly that we are an aging community, and I would argue we are not prepared for how our demographics are aging, and so to have additional assisted living in a facility like this would fill a great need in our community. And then looking at the other benefits, childcare, of course, I can speak from my own personal experience trying to find childcare in recent years. It's very much needed, particularly in an area like Lynn Valley with so many young families. So what's being recommended tonight is that staff report back on ways to expedite the Legion project and present options. So as I understand it, this will allow us to help move this project forward in a much quicker way, and allow us to fully consider all of the details and various aspects of it. And there are lots of questions that I will have going forward, but I think there's a lot of merit in a project like this, just with the benefit that comes with all of the different elements. So it is exactly the type of project that I would like to see expedited, and I'm happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just my own comments on this. First, I would just want to affirm that Councillor Pope is well within your rights to promote this project and move this project forward and ask for it to be expedited. The courts have consistently found that politicians, in the exercise of their duty, can become cheerleaders for projects and advocates for them. We don't have to stay on the sideline. We don't have to stay neutral. I happen to think in my role as mayor, I kind of have to at least support a modicum of neutrality throughout all of our processes so people have an opportunity to fairly be heard. But it is actually well within rights for politicians to become advocates for a particular project. It's not without its sticky situations, I'll admit. So I just want to affirm that Councillor Pope definitely has the ability to come and propose this in the manner that she has. and that there's nothing untoward about doing that. And at the end of the day, though, the legal expectation is that when faced with the decision at public hearing, we all are required to keep an open mind. Even though I may have campaigned for something for years and years and years and years, I have to be amenable to persuasion at the point of the public hearing so that I can listen to the public in a receptive way and make my decision. But that doesn't in any way stop a politician from being an advocate for or against a particular project. My comments specific to this proposal at this time, and again, we haven't officially seen the application. I have met with the development, and largely what I had seen falls in line with what Councillor Pope just presented here today. But it's a very tricky situation, is because you're going to have to come in, and if you're going to decide to expedite a process, as I said, it's a cart and horse issue. You kind of got to do that at a fairly early process. But the actual public decision is at a fairly late point in the process. And it becomes very hard for us to affect our processes to support that project if you wait until such a late point in the process. And so I see no other way to do it except to address the issue at the front end. I think that for projects, though, we have to have a little bit of a lowered expectation comment needs to be out there. The District of North Vancouver our staff are very busy. We have very limited staffing. In fact, we have quite a number of vacancies within our organization. And so people may have an expectation that when we say we're going to expedite something, that we're going to be able to dramatically, on our own terms, shorten up the timelines for it. And while I assure you, we do our best, particularly when we are the applicant and proponent, and it's on District of North Vancouver to expedite and speed up proposals. We were talking about one earlier where we were able to put forward a fairly complex project with development permits in a fairly short order. The challenge is it's a partnership, we'll say. The developer needs to be able to respond to staff in a short order. Some of the issues are extremely complex with mechanical, electrical drawings and other provincial requirements that are policed by us, and they take time. And quite often you have projects on complex sites, and I have to say this site that we're talking about has a huge grade change on it and between it and its neighbors, and so there's going to be complex discussion about the siting in it. So maybe I'm going too far into the lowered expectation side of it, but I don't know how quickly we'll be able to expedite, even if this was a project with overwhelming public benefit and the district was the applicant in it. I still think there's just still going to be some necessary process in order to make sure that it's built in the correct way. But generally speaking, I'm supportive of us being able to have the discussion early on in a process about how the council wants to approach it without us making it a fait accompli. The council needs to still be able to say yay or nay at some point in the future, and just simply because we want to have the discussion about what we could do to expedite a project shouldn't mean that it's automatically an approved project. There still has to be a public process that takes place. And so you have my commitment to continue to try to make sure that that people with differing views are welcome to the process in this. But I'm going to be supportive of this recommendation. I will, sorry, I'm going to have to go into my next 2 minutes, I guess. But I'm going to say there's a little bit of a red line for me on one piece, and that is when you're in the middle of a very developed town center and you're asked, like the people in Sealand as an example, everybody knows that we're redeveloping the Sealand neighborhood. Everybody knows what it looks like to go through construction. They've been going through the construction for a long period of time. And so when you talk about the potential to waive a public hearing in that situation, I go, okay, well, the community can expect, what's going on. We get very little negative feedback to what we propose in those town center areas because we've advertised along the way. When it comes to waiving a public hearing, which I know is going to be one of the recommendations that is offered because the provincial government gave us the ability to waive a public hearing when something complies with the OCP. But I'm not supportive of us waiving a public hearing when it comes to such a dramatic change to the neighboring projects. It doesn't mean I'm opposed to the project or in favor of the project. It just means that I think we have an obligation still to go through the public hearing process when it's a dramatic change. So with that, I'll say I'm supportive. I look forward to seeing what the staff come back with as far as recommendations. I just wanted to give my 2 cents on waiving public hearings in cases where we're outside of town centers. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm very pleased to support this motion of Councillor Pope's, and I thank Councillor Pope for bringing it forward. I won't summarize all of the benefits of this potential proposal because they've already been discussed, except to say that clearly these are the kinds of projects and the kind of community benefits that we so urgently want to have expedited. And just addressing that public hearing point, I believe that the demand for seniors housing of this type is so great that I would support it going forward without a public hearing. I think it would be upsetting to us and upsetting to the community if the benefits of a project of the type that's being envisioned are significantly delayed due to delays in the process that stall the overall process. I mean, on the issue of long-term care beds, and I'm going to focus on that. The report states that the current need in the District of North Vancouver is 276 seniors care beds. But given the demographics, that number is going to rise at an alarming rate. I happen to be in a unique vantage point. More Canadians were born in April of 1961 than any other month, and I was born in February of 1961. So I can see my demographic cohort growing old, and we're marching towards the need for these types of facilities. It would be very foolish, in my view, of governments, including this local government, to not be alert to this demographic reality of aging and the housing needs that that's going to require. I also say on a personal level, my late mother died of Lewy bodies dementia. I know firsthand the strains that are placed on a family by not having sufficient capacity to care for our elderly. And that's why I view the matter as so urgent that I would favor in this circumstance dispensing of a public hearing. So those are my comments. Thank you for bringing the motion forward. I believe that it's the nature of the offerings that are discussed, the long-term care beds, the workforce housing for the people who are going to look after them, the child care, the supports to the Legion and its operation and continued function in our community. When you put all that together, I don't think there's too many of us who wouldn't want to see that expedited. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Forbes, your comments.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, I had the presentation on my computer and I don't have it. So I am not going to speak tonight to the project because what has me questioning and is the process, not necessarily the project. And I'm not saying I'm in favor or not in favor of the project. The process to me is backwards. It is the cart before the horse. It's the end of July when an awful lot of people aren't aware of even this project. And I'm wondering where those drawings came from because the staff doesn't have them. Nothing's posted on the site. We don't have an application. We don't, the Vancouver Health hasn't signed on board. So it seems to me the cart is way ahead of the horse here. It's not that I don't agree with the assessments and the needs that have spoken. I do, but I also believe in proper process. And I'm concerned that I don't understand this process. There's a lot of things about it I don't understand. I can't in good conscience vote for something when I don't know what I'm voting for. And there's too many ifs sitting out there. Also, if this motion had been put forward without a specific property name, the idea of expediting this type of development, I'd be 1,000% on board with it. But not when the specific property is named. We don't have it listed on our website. We don't have Vancouver Health signing off on it yet. This was the first time that I believe I've seen drawings like this. It's a private project. It's not public. So there's profit involved here. And what does affordable units for seniors mean? What does that affordable mean? Especially when it's a private project. I don't know if this is true, but this is what I've been told, is that the housing for health staff isn't specific to staff that would serve this long-term seniors' needs. So that could mean that you could have, and I noticed it was said earlier that it would be North Shore Healthcare. So I think that needs to be defined, or is that somebody who works on the North Shore or lives on the North Shore but works at St. Paul's? So I question that part of it. I think this is so general in order to be able to try and vote on. And staff time. I mean, we have trouble getting things back from staff, and I've heard staff say over and over, we just can't do anymore. We just can't get any more done. So right now, when there's a huge pressure on staff, and it's coming as well, and it will be on council, from the provincial government with everything that they're changing and how they're changing the rules and the reporting, this is not a time when we can expect staff to be able to go ahead. I just saw that both the city and the district are advertising for multiple positions. We're very understaffed. So to ask staff to go away and work on an expedition project that may happen and may not happen, or may be not even useful once we hear from the province, seems to me that that's not a good use of staff time right now when it's in short supply. This process, I just want to reassure, like you did, I've had to reassure a number of people who have called me and sent me messages that this vote tonight is to do with simply getting it expedited. It's nothing to do with the particular project itself. It will still go through all the normal stages, like first motion, and then public hearing, and second, third, and adoption or defeat. So the public will still get their turn to say what they want to say about this. But I would note that there's a petition that's been going around since the first time a development was proposed on this site, and it has over 2,200 signatures against this development and this type of development the second time around. And I think as a council, we're doing a fairly good job on trying to meet the needs of the community as best we can. I like all the different things, the things that are being offered here, such as childcare in the long term and the health workers housing. I like all of that, but I'm not sure what makes this project more important to be expedited than what council is working on in different areas of the district already. I think the one last thing is it should be pointed out that that expedited timeline is the Legion's timeline, not the district's timeline. So the district can't give that opinion until we get a staff report back, and I think it's unfair to be asking for a staff report before we even have a project to expedite. So I think the process is out of whack here. And I'm not going to speak to anything else but process tonight, because the time will come to speak to the project directly when and if it comes before us. One other thing I'd just like to mention, there was a rather lengthy email that was sent in by person in the public that had an awful lot of questions in it. And I'm wondering what the intention of staff is to answer those questions, or should they be answered now?
Do I understand, Mr. Milburn, can you speak to how staff will deal with public questions leading up to a decision like that?
Your worship, we don't have an application in hand at the moment, so it's difficult for us to speak on hypotheticals. However, should this recommendation pass tonight, we anticipate the applicant would probably submit in relatively short order. In our conversations with them, they've identified that interest. And so we'd be able to glean those answers and then start to formulate our recommendation to council. Ultimately, if there is an application that goes forward, there will be some form of community engagement, and folks will be able to provide their comments and seek answers at that time. Doing that in advance of council's consideration in September, as recommended, is very difficult for staff to manage this time, but we would acknowledge the receipt of the information and advise them of when council would be considering the matter in September, if indeed the motion is passed tonight. And then so we'd be letting people know how they can find answers in the future, and that there will be a subsequent process directed by council.
Thank you very much for the response, Mr. Milburn. You're over 6 minutes.
Oh.
Councillor Back, your second time speaking. It's just the gremlins again, I think is. Councillor Pope, you went full 6 on your introduction.
I did?
You did.
Oh, all right.
But I mean, there's still going to be, we'll have the vote tonight, and even when this kind of a matter comes back, there's still going to be lots of opportunity to talk about this. And I hope that it can help frame, not specific to the Legion, but talk about how we're going to enter into a mechanism to be able to address expediting developments as a whole. Is the standard that if it's a privately owned one, that 100% of the units have to have some sort of non-market component to it? Is that what triggers it being expedited? Well, you know what, we have developments that have quite a number of units, 10%, 20% of units that are, but does that not warrant it? So I hope this leads to the broader discussion about how we select the process that's appropriate for the types of developments that we're seeing going forward. I'm prepared to call the question on the motion. Okay, all in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried with Councillor Forbes opposed. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we'll see that come back in the fall. Council, we've completed the regular business of the evening. And we do have an opportunity for reports. I would like to lead off by saying that this is our last public meeting before the summer break. The council now will not have a public meeting again until into September. Opportunity for two big things to happen. The council to get a little bit of a rest from the 450-page weekly packages that we get for council meetings and workshops and such. But it's also an opportunity for our staff to lock in. The course has been set by the council, and we now have a period of time where we're not going to have to keep coming back to council for decisions. And so the staff can actually move forward on quite a number of projects, and obviously knock off a lot of vacation hours in the process. So it's a very important time for us in the municipality. There's still lots of work being done around here. I will still be here through the bulk of the summer. I'm going to take about a week off to do a bit of a road trip with my daughter, and then I'll probably take some time off back at the beginning of September. But other than that, if you have issues that require my attention, I don't take this time off from all of my duties. We just don't have the public meetings during this period of time. Obviously, we're all still generally available through electronic communications as well, even though we won't have a public meeting during that period of time. I think that's the only public report that I'm going to make, other than to just simply say I was so grateful to see the rain this morning, and that really brightened up my day, ironically, to go. I do want to just remind everybody, even though we've had rain today, I think it was about 25 millimeters of rain, and that's a really good thing. The conditions are still tinder dry. Any organics that are underground in our community are still tinder dry. And so when we hear about people having a party on the side of the river with a little campfire and stuff, it may seem cute and folksy and like a fun kind of neighborhood thing to do. It's extremely dangerous right now. These are not the conditions to do that. Do that in the spring when it's raining and other times, but it can get away from us so fast. So I just wanted to tip my hat to all of the crews that responded to the 2 fires that we had in the last week on the North Shore, the one up on the southwest slope of Seymour Mountain that became quite an intense fire, and also the quick action of the crews on the side of the of Lynn Creek and responding to the smell of smoke in that area. That's my hat is off to them for their quick responses and help keep us safe. It gives me confidence to see that they're the right people and resources are in place to respond to emergencies in our community. Other than that, I don't have any further reports. Councillor Hanson, you had a report you'd like to make?
Yeah, thank you very much. I'd just like to report briefly on the meeting of the North Shore Standing Committee on Substance Use met last Wednesday. We began with taking stock of the fact that in the month of June, 184 British Columbians perished due to fentanyl overdose, 6.2 a day. To put it in context, during the time we've held this meeting tonight, we've probably lost 2 British Columbians to fentanyl overdose. And North Vancouver District is getting its full proportionate share of those deaths. That committee has very good attendance now, is very active on this topic, and is going to be coming forward with a communications plan, which will seek to save lives by communicating some facts around this. So you're going to be hearing more from us, but it was a very full discussion from representatives of all the constituent jurisdictions, including the police and fire, school boards, and so forth. And you're going to be hearing more from us on a communication plan with respect to fentanyl deaths. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I see no further reports. I was just going to mention that there are still a number of events over the next week recognizing our neighbors, the Squamish Nation, who are currently doing month-long celebrations for Squamish 100, and officially July 23rd. So I guess just yesterday was the official 100-year anniversary from the time that they amalgamated together as a nation. And so they've been recognizing that with activities and events, and they still have a few more this week. So I would encourage everyone to get out and participate in some of those events and celebrate with the Squamish Nation friends and neighbors. So at this point, thank you to the staff who prepared the reports for our consideration tonight. Thank you to the public for coming and participating and sharing your views. And thank you to the council for your deliberations. Have a fantastic evening, week, and month break. Really appreciate all the work you've done to help get us through the workload we put on you. You've earned a much needed rest, and we'll pick it up again in the fall. Having said that, if emergency stuff comes up, you're going to get a phone call from me. Thank you all. Good night.